This English short story is called The Last Seat. Now, learning English through story is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Here is how to do this. First, listen to the story and read the story if you are on YouTube. And then stay around because you can learn 10 different words and phrases all from the story and get more examples too. Let's get started. Ella hurried through the crowded train station, her suitcase rolling noisily behind her. The overhead speaker crackled. The 2:30 train to Edinburgh is now boarding at platform 9. She picked up her pace, weaving between passengers, dodging suitcases and people standing in the middle of the walkway. She booked a ticket but not a seat, and now she was cutting it close. If she didn't find a spot soon, she'd be standing for the next 4 hours. Reaching the train just in time, she stepped inside, scanning the carriage. Every seat was taken. People were settling in with their coffees, pulling out laptops, or staring at their phones. Ella sighed. Great. Then she spotted it. A single empty seat next to a guy who was looking out the window, headphones in. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over. Excuse me, is this seat taken? The guy pulled out one earbud and turned to look at her. He had dark blonde hair, a slight stubble, and eyes that took a second to focus, like he had been lost in thought. Oh, he said, sitting up straighter. No, go ahead. Ella smiled politely, shoved her bag onto the overhead rack, and sat down. The train pulled away from the station, the movement making Ella relax slightly. She pulled out a book and tried to read, but after a few minutes she found herself staring out the window instead. The countryside flashed by, green fields stretching far into the distance. The guy next to her took out his earbuds and leaned back in his seat. He glanced at her book. Any good? He asked. Ella turned the cover towards him. It's all right. Bit slow, though. He smiled. That's the worst, isn't it? You keep reading, hoping it gets better, but it never does. She laughed. Exactly. A few moments passed before he spoke again. You heading to Edinburgh for work or fun? Just visiting my sister, she said. She lives there. You? Work trip, he replied. But I lived there for a few years. Ella nodded. Nice. Do you still like it? Yeah, it's a great city, but I don't go back as often as I should. She noticed the way his smile faded slightly, like there was something more to the story. The conversation drifted from books to travel, then to childhood memories. It was easy, like they weren't complete strangers sitting next to each other on a train, but two old friends catching up after years apart. Jake, she learned his name halfway through the trip, told her about his years living in Edinburgh, how he used to work at a cafe near the university, how he once got lost on a hike and ended up in the wrong town. Ella told him about her job, her sister's habit of collecting old teacups, and how she once broken her ankle trying to roller skate in a shopping centre. Seriously? Jake laughed. A shopping centre? Ella grinned. In my defence, I was 12, and my best friend dared me to do it. Let me guess, you lost balance, knocked over a display of biscuits, and caused chaos? She gasped. How do you know? He shook his head, smiling. I've met enough people like you. By the time the train reached Edinburgh, the sky had started to turn pink. Ella looked at her phone. 4 hours had passed faster than she expected. As the train slowed, people stood up, pulling down bags and stretching their legs. Ella reached for her suitcase, but Jake had already grabbed it for her. Thanks, she said, stepping into the aisle. No problem, he replied. Then, hesitating for a second, he added, Hey, if you ever need another book recommendation... She smiled. Are you about to suggest that slow book you gave up on? Jake chuckled. All right, fine. If you ever need a good book recommendation, let me know. He pulled out his phone, holding it up. Ella took out hers too, and in a few seconds, they had exchanged numbers. As she stepped off the train, she glanced back. Jake was still standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her go. Enjoy your visit, he said. She smiled. You too. The train doors beeped and closed behind her. Ella turned and walked towards the exit, her suitcase rolling behind her. So that is the story. Now let's analyse the key expressions, their meanings, and also additional examples so that you can learn more English. The first one is cut it close. Now this means to almost run out of time. And in the story it said Ella was cutting it close to finding a seat on the train because she didn't want to stand for 4 hours. Another example is I woke up late and cut it close to missing my flight, which is a really bad feeling. The next one is pull out. To pull out, this means to remove something from somewhere. For example, in the story, the guy pulled out one earbud and turned to look at her. So he had his earbuds in, his headphones, and he pulled one of the earbuds out before looking at her. Another example is she pulled out the product from the bag. The next one is this, sit up straighter. Now you can see from the picture, if you're watching on YouTube, of somebody with a book on their head, to sit up straight. Now this means to adjust your posture and become more alert. For example, Jake sat up straighter when Ella spoke to him. So he sat up straighter when she spoke to him. Another example is he sat up straighter when the teacher asked a question, which is common in classrooms. The next one is catch up. To catch up. This means to talk about things that have happened after time apart. So if you haven't seen somebody for a while, you can catch up with them. In the story it said it was easy, like there were two old friends catching up. So that suggests that they were very friendly. Another example is from the picture is let's meet for coffee and catch up. You might hear people say as well, let's catch up soon. Let's catch up soon. The next one is this, drift into. Now, this is probably a little bit more advanced or not as common, and it means to slowly move into a topic or activity. In this story, it said the conversation drifted from books to travel to childhood memories. So it went from the conversation being about books to the conversation being about travel and childhood memories. And the meeting drifted into small talk after a while. The next one is end up. End up. This means to arrive somewhere or in a situation unexpectedly. And this is very common in everyday English. For example, Jake once got lost on a hike and ended up in the wrong town, which is unexpected. And we took the wrong bus and ended up at the beach. The next one is slow down. Slow down. And you probably know this to reduce speed. As the train slowed down, people stood up. So as the train slowed down, people stood up. Now, there's always this thing on a plane that people stand up as soon as the plane stops. Another example with public transport. And here's another example. She slowed down as she reached the traffic lights. The next one is this, pull down. Pull down. This means to bring something from a higher place. People stood up, pulling down bags and stretching their legs. And can you pull down my bag for me? This is what somebody might ask you on a plane. Can you pull down my bag for me? The next one is hold up. Hold up. Now this means to lift or show something. Jake pulled out his phone, holding it up. And you can see from the picture, she held up the map so everyone could see. And then the next one is step off. To step off. This means to move off a train, bus or platform. For example, Ella stepped off the train and turned back. And then be careful you don't step off the edge. Want to learn more? Be sure to click another video on your screen now and go to the description for more lessons and also to get the phrases from this lesson.